Hey everyone, I just want to issue a quick trigger warning for anyone who may be affected by me talking about existentialism, death, maybe like religion and stuff, and mental illness. I don't know. We'll see where this is going to go, but just a fair warning. If you feel like you need to skip out on this one, I totally understand. Don't worry about it. This is more of a video for myself. Okay, hey, let's get cozy. Let's talk about some stuff that's not fun. I just let out that exhale, but that was like more of for myself off camera, but now I'm going to leave it in because I think it's funny because it makes it seem like it's like a YouTube apology where they start with the old, I made a severe lapse in my judgment, baby. I freaking slipped up back there. Okay, where to start? I was in therapy today, you know, good for me. And this video is kind of coming out of something that I talked about in therapy because my therapist said maybe I should make this video. And who knows if I'm going to edit it or not. I'll just shoot it and then maybe even edit it and then maybe decide not even to put it out if I'm not comfortable. But I might as well get it off my chest and then we'll see where it goes. And this is going to be a very different video than I normally post. I'm usually, you know, having a good time or yelling at somebody or doing something crazy or doing backflips. I'm always doing backflips back there. Isn't that crazy how I'm always doing that? But we're going to have to wait till tomorrow for me to do another backflip. Today, we're going to talk about something that's not that fun. Okay, we're going to back up to the start of my life, I guess. So I was raised in a very Christian household. We were like non-denominational Christian. We went to one of those churches where they play rock and roll Christian songs on the stage, Hillsong United, you know, all that good stuff. And that's kind of the community I was raised in, and that's totally fine. There were a lot of good people in that community and a lot of not good things that came out of it, but you know, can't you say that about everything, right? And through this religious uprising of mine, obviously if you want to look to how I am now, I do not really consider myself Christian. I sort of consider myself, well, we'll get there. Let's continue telling the story. I grew up in this community. I was very integrated in it. I went to church every Sunday. I did like student youth group stuff on Wednesday, and my family was always super connected in it. And leaving all of that religious stuff off to the side, the reason I bring it up is because I was raised believing that after life you were going to go to heaven, that you were going to be with God forever, and the bad people would go to hell, you know, and they would, you know, burn and perish for eternity and because of their sins, and it would suck, and that would be eternity, and that's the rest of forever. All this time you spend in this tiny little fraction of your life. In relation to eternity, your life is closer to zero than it is to any other number. And so that amount of time translates to what you're going to experience for the rest of eternity. And that's a big thing. That's a big thing, especially as a young kid, to be taught. But it's also an easy thing at the same time, because the opposite of that is struggling with the idea of nothing after life. And that's a scary thing to grapple with too. But luckily for me, I was sitting in the comfort for maybe the first 10, 12, 13 years of my life, knowing that I didn't have to worry about the afterlife because I was Christian and I was going to go to heaven. And lickety split, that's it. That's a thing people say. But as I grew up and as I started to have my doubts in Christianity, I also started to have my doubts in the rest of it, like especially with the afterlife. That was kind of one of my big things. As you know now, and I'm coming back around to it, I do not consider myself a Christian. I don't consider myself a Christ follower, which is what I would identify myself as probably until I was a junior in college, I think. So until I was about 19 years old, I would consider myself a Christ follower. I don't want to make it seem like this is a video that has anything to do with me saying anything bad about Christianity or people who follow the teachings of the Bible or any other religion, really. So yeah, that was more of a self-realization of like, I really hope that people don't feel bad about themselves, because no, that's not what any of this is about. This is just to show that I still want anyone who's watching this or who supports me to be able to believe whatever they want to believe, as long as they're not hurting other people. That will always be my belief, is that you can believe whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody else. Okay, so now at this point I would consider myself agnostic, which when I was a Christian I would sort of scoff at, and I was like, well, if you're agnostic then you're actually just an atheist. loser, which I don't believe anymore, obviously, because I am an agnostic, because I look at everything and I'm like, I don't think I'll ever be able to understand what I believe and be confident in it ever again. And although I look at other religions like Buddhism, and I'm like sort of interested in that, I still have that fear of knowing that I'm never going to be certain about anything. And so anything that's like a lifestyle, anything, I kind of stray away from. And this whole religion thing is way too big of a topic to cover in this video, but it's just going to lead into what I'm talking about specifically today. Call myself an agnostic, or specifically like a hopeful agnostic, which is what Rhett from Red and Link would describe it as when they did a podcast about their own journey with religion. And that's kind of what spoke to me when I was sort of coming out of it. Still, again, too big of a story to talk about in this video. This is literally 11 p.m. at night, and I want to put this out tomorrow on the 7th, and I have to do my Wordle in 8 minutes, so let's pick up the pace here. Even while I was religious in high school and I started going into high school and my brain started developing enough for me to come to my own conclusions about things and to believe my own things, I started struggling with a lot of doubt in that area of religion. Not really specifically with anything like death, but with stuff about, you know, whether what I believe is real, whether these things that have been taught to us about certain sins are actually sins. And that doubt kind of spiraled into me ending up, you know, leaving this religion that I don't agree with anymore because of so many different factors, obviously. But a big thing, and this is sort of where the video technically starts after all this time, is that one of my biggest doubts and fears was what comes after life. Even when I was religious, I still constantly had the fear that heaven was going to be something that wasn't a thing, you know? I was scared not only about that, but even if heaven is a thing and we don't sin in heaven and we don't feel sadness, does that change the internal chemistry of who I am biologically as a person? If I go to heaven and suddenly I don't sin anymore, am I even me, you know? And if I love someone and we both die and we go to heaven, am I still going to love them, or are we all just these weird single beings that don't experience that intimacy with somebody anymore? So these were things I was grappling with as a freaking high schooler who was just stressed about so many other things, but also going to church twice a week and still stressed about where I was going to be in 10, 20, 30, 80 years down the line. And as I start to think about doubting my religion, what constantly brings me back is that I could not leave, or else I wouldn't be believing in heaven anymore, which would mean that I believe that when we die, nothing happens and we're just gone. And that just hit me like a bag of bricks. Like I could not grapple with that. I could not deal with that at all. Like this idea that this one thing, the main thing, which is like you will die and you will spend the rest of your life either with Jesus, happy as can be, nothing's wrong, and you won't experience any pain or suffering ever again, or the opposite, which is you go to hell with everyone who doesn't believe. And the idea you're taught is that, you know, there's this eternal suffering, this torment that is literally lasts forever, which is just an impossible thing to wrap your mind around. You mentally cannot figure that out in your head, you know? It's the same thing with how I feel about space expanding forever. It's like I mentally cannot figure that one out, you know? It's like the more you think about it, the more it just screws you up. And that was the same thing that happened to me with death. Is like every time I would start thinking about it, it would just hit me, and it was just like I just couldn't turn the switch off, you know? Once I started thinking about dying, I was going to think about dying for a while. And this is something I felt from when I was a kid all the way until literally today. And there were definitely waves of it happening, especially when I was in college. I would go to bed and my routine was every single night before I would go to bed, I would pray, you know? I would close my eyes and I would pray for a good like minute or two, and I would talk to God about everything that went on in my life. I would, you know, freaking apologize for my sins. I would ask questions, you know, and I did that every single night of my entire life until I was about to be a junior in college. And the process would go that I would pray, and the moment I start thinking about talking to God, I would start thinking again about death, and I'd start thinking about whether or not I'm even talking to anyone, and whether or not this whole thing that my life was built on wasn't real. And that is like something that no kid should have to think about, you know? And who knows what a kid should have to think about, because especially if you're religious, I understand that when you're religious, this is everything, you know? God is everything, and that should be your priority. That is something a kid should be worrying about. But looking back, the amount of stress, the amount of guilt, the amount of questions I had as a kid weighed on me so much that it changed, you know, who I was as I grew up. Like, I am a different person because of that. And that is something that is so strange to think about, that some concepts like this are just life altering in terms of who I am, my personality, my beliefs, my thoughts that go through my head. And that's something that will never change, you know? I don't necessarily blame any one person for it or anything like that. I do think I had a really great upbringing, and obviously I was raised amazingly because look at me. I mean, I'm awesome. I'm the coolest. I'm the best. But the biggest thing that all of this had an effect on, and who knows if this is the complete reason why, but it's death, and trying to figure out how I can not be constantly worried about the idea that, what if I go away one day? What if I die, which could happen at any moment? It happens to people every single second. What if that's it? And what does that mean? Because, you know, it's a common question. What's the point of all of this? If you start thinking about, what if I just die and I'm gone forever? Like, why does anything matter? Because I'm gone and I don't have to think about any of this. I won't even remember. I won't have any conscious recollection of anything happening, and everything I leave behind practically worthless if you think about it in like a very logical, not, you know, left brain way, if I'm using the right terms correctly. And that's like such an intense question, you know, and that's such an intense topic that has defined my life. Like, I can confidently say that it is the theme of Nick Green's entire life, you know, the 23 odd years I've lived on this earth. This is the thing that has like defined who I am, is the concept of life and death, and the concept of, what if I go away and that's it, and that's the end of the game, and why should I care anymore? And I know that sounds like an alarming thing to say, and you don't have to worry about me. I'm safe and sound, and I do not have dangerous thoughts about this kind of stuff, but it is something that I think about more than I think most people do, you know? I think about this constantly, and there are sections of my life where I remember just thinking about it every second of the day. Like, it was always on my mind, and it's something that's been going on my whole life. Even before I think I was probably in high school, these questions would come up, and I would stay up at night thinking about these kind of things. I remember I was in 4th grade, and my biggest fear in the world was drowning. I was so scared of drowning, and then I think that was more because I thought it was going to be like painful and scary, and I'm still terrified of it to this day. But that was stuff that I remember in 4th grade, the summer before I went into 4th grade, I wanted the summer to be over so bad, because all I thought about every day during the summer was, what if I went to the pool and some guy grabbed me and strapped me down and chucked me into the bottom of a 15-foot deep pool? And that was like my biggest fear. That was the biggest thing going on in my life. That's like what I worried about, which is bizarre. And I still remember that. And I remember thinking, I can't wait till I get back to school, because then I'll have something to distract myself all day, because I'll go back to freaking 4th grade and I'll be doing reading time, and I don't have to think about getting strapped down and weighed down to the bottom of the pool and drowning as a little 9-year-old kid. So I think religion is the main part of that. The other part of that is something I don't talk about a lot, which is that I technically was diagnosed with OCD. My doctor told me, and there's not a really technical like diagnosis of it, at least from what my doctor told me. It's just sort of like they look at your symptoms and tell you. And most of why he diagnosed me with that was because I have a lot of physical tics. I mean, sometimes you'll notice in videos, and this is something I've never really, I don't think I've ever talked about on video, and I don't talk about it to most of my friends, but I have physical compulsions where I scratch my neck a lot, I adjust my myself in my seat a lot. I touch my face, I rub my eyes, basically everything about me moving, which I would say coincides with a big theme of my life. I remember ever since I was, I think maybe 6 or 7, I was itching my neck for no reason. And I didn't know why it was. And to this day, we still don't know why it was. But whenever I start thinking about it, I can't stop. And those compulsions also translate a lot to mental compulsions that I never even really realized until recently, which was that once a thought gets in my head, and it almost always has to do with death, I cannot stop thinking of it. I get into a loop, and it is just so hard to break out of, you know? I start thinking about where I am now and why that isn't going to matter, because, you know, one day all these people that I have these close relationships with, I'm never going to like ever remember or have any recollection about ever again. And that's like, I don't know if I can fully accept that, you know? And I think part of this is tough because there's two sides to the spectrum. There's the side of very religious people that are super confident in how they feel about the afterlife, and it sounds really nice to be in that like comfort. I'm not gonna say that I see it as like this blind eye to like the truth or whatever. Like I'm not that high and mighty. I mean, my whole stance is that I have no idea what's gonna happen, and so I think that's like that's a lot easier to do than to actually follow a religion and follow the guide. So like I don't look down on that at all. But the other side of it is people who are seemingly atheist or whatever, and even if they are agnostic, they just don't really care that much, or they don't really think that much about it. And so I found myself on both sides of this coin, between people who either are comfortable knowing what's going to happen or are comfortable knowing what's going to happen, whether that's heaven or whether that's nothing. And I found myself in the middle, being someone who did believe in heaven but then doubted themselves, and now has fallen into this loop of being so freaked out by this whole thing. I mean, I've spent so much time not realizing that I'm coming up with different coping mechanisms for this thing that I'm so afraid of. There's this thing called a life expectancy will keep going up, and you know, the idea is that this thing is catching up, and now that it's here, if you're still alive by the time the life expectancy is going, medicine will catch up and you won't ever die. And like, I mean, unless some tragic accident happens. The idea is that technology improves to a point where, you know, we're basically immortal, which is kind of a ridiculous thing because there are a lot of, you know, notable people who believe in this shit. But you have to remember that when the life expectancy age was 40, we had like a crazy high infant mortality rate because, you know, we hadn't fully figured out medicine, and there were like freaking wars, and people didn't know what like these diseases were. And you could say that about now too, you know, you could be like, oh, we just haven't figured out like whatever the disease of death is, and maybe we'll solve it. But the main idea is like, this isn't a thing that can protect me from death, you know? At some point this is not going to save the day and come through, and even if it does, I'm gonna end up being this husk of a guy who is like just gross and old and like is 1,000 years old because medicine keeps improving, and I'm holed up in my room too afraid to die. And I think that's like a bigger horror story than never existing again. But to me, it's not, because I'm deathly afraid of death. And then the other coping mechanism is that like by the time I die, they're gonna come up with some way to chip our brains, and then we'll go into some virtual reality where every second in real life is like 10 years in the virtual reality world, and we're all freaking hooked up sitting in our chairs, and every day is like an eternity, and we live in this virtual reality world for a lifetime, and we forget that we ever had ourselves in the real world, which is also a horror story. But that like sounds appealing to me because I'm so afraid of dying. And then I also have this hope that like the technology will advance so far in the future, like millions of years ahead, where they're going to be able to go back and bring back people from the dead and put them in some virtual world. And like, it's just so like, no one should be like happy about that. Like, I should not be hoping for that, but I find myself constantly coming up with ways to calm myself down from the idea that one day I could be gone, and there's a possibility that like I never think a thought again, and it freaks me out. And there's so many things around this that also scare me, you know, the idea that I am in first person and I am in my own head and no one else, no matter how close. I've been very close with a lot of people throughout my life, people that have been very personal to me and know every part of my life, and yet they will not think the same thoughts I do, and they will never know what's going on inside my head. It's not like I'm like the Joker or something. They'll never know what's going on in my head. But like they really, like you really are the only person who will ever know exactly what you're thinking and will feel the way that you feel. And no matter how close you get to someone, you cannot crack that freaking nut or whatever. And it's like these kind of things just invade my head day after day, and it's a lot of energy, you know. It's, you don't realize how much it weighs on you until you start talking to someone about it, or until you start spilling out to a camera like it's your therapist. And I don't really know what my answer is, because you know, I have a million answers of, you know, when you start thinking about that stuff, you need to remember that no matter what you do, the result doesn't change. If there's an afterlife or if there's no afterlife, what you're doing right now doesn't change. I agree with that. Yet I cannot get myself to calm down from the idea that I still am going to worry about it. And especially worrying about the idea of death, not even dying when I'm 80, dying right now. It terrifies me. The idea that like I could go away and not know what's going on. I could just die. Life will move on without me, and then all those people will die. No one's gonna remember me in 100, 200 years. I'm not gonna like be of importance. I'm not providing, you know. And that's not me asking for like compliments. I genuinely, when I look at the whole world and how small we are, it freaks me out, because I'm like, why anything, you know? And that brings me, I guess, to today, where I have been sort of talking to my therapist about this the past few weeks, and she's been helping me through it, and it's nice to talk about. But this thing that kind of comes in waves, you know, started in high school, it came back around college, and it always seemed like I started worrying about death when life started getting better, you know? And it's not that like when life wasn't as good, like when I was in college and life wasn't as interesting, I didn't worry as much about death, because I was sort of like meh about life. And it's not like I wanted to die, like I still was scared of it, but it wasn't like at the top of my mind. And then it always seems to come back when like things are getting good and I'm like, hey, I don't want to die yet, like I'm not ready. And it scares me to know that like any day now I could just be driving, I could be walking, I could be in my sleep, I could be standing here right now on camera, and it's like, man, that's so scary. The idea of just saying like I'm not ready yet to go is so sad to me that I have a really hard time coming to terms with it. And I'm not like, I'm not at peace with that idea. Like I just have to be honest and say, like, although I genuinely just cannot do a single thing about it. I do not have control over my own mortality besides, you know, being safe and making sure I don't accidentally slip off a ledge and crack my head open. I have no decision about where I go after I die and whether or not someone decides to freaking assassinate me. Assassinate. I say assassinate because I'm a very noteworthy person. I still just am not ready, and I don't know if I will. There's a lot of old people that I always hear say that they lived a full life and they're, you know, happy with dying and they think they've come to peace with it. And I'm just scared I'm never going to get there, because I feel like I'm so behind where so many people are right now. It feels like so many people, this is like not on their mind, and they're probably going to be at peace with it by the time they're old. But I feel like my biggest fear is that I'm going to grow up and be like 70 and not be ready to go. It's like so scary to me. Something that really freaked me out when Larry King died, funny enough, is that he talked a lot in his interviews about him being afraid of death as like a 300-year-old man, I think he was. And like it always got to me, because I was like, if this old man is not ready to go, then like will I be even close? Because I am thinking about it all the time. And like the saddest part is, out of all of this, is that I have not even experienced like a major death in my life. I've lost all my grandparents, and it wasn't a close enough death to really rattle me to my core and like make me face the idea of it. And it freaks me out that like when it does happen and someone close to me goes, that I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle it. And it's almost like embarrassing to me that I don't have anyone close to me who's died, and I don't have a crazy situation where I almost died. And I have lived a very safe life. I just have not come close with facing anything that really makes me feel the way I do, besides the way I was raised and the way my brain works, and that's scary to me. And so I talked to my therapist about it, and I kind of would mention a lot of times that I wanted to talk about it publicly, or maybe just like put a video out there or something, but I was a little too afraid to because I didn't know what a good way to go about it was. But she said, hey, if you want to make this video, even if you decide not to put it out, just shoot it and get it off your chest, maybe even edit it and put it out and see what happens. And so I was like, okay, maybe this will make me feel better, because I am surrounded by people who don't really worry about this stuff a lot of the time. I know very few people who worry about it like I do, and I'm very privileged to be in the situation I'm in, and I might as well use that privilege to allow myself to put my thoughts out there and maybe see how other people feel about the situation and how they might react to what I'm saying, because I want to say something and at least just, I don't know, if I care this much, it's like you might as well just throw shit at the wall and see what happens. Throw shit at the wall and see if it stinks. And so here I am. I listened to my therapist from this morning, and I finally shot this video. I finished therapy and I was like, I'm gonna shoot the video right now, right after therapy. And I sat down and I was like, I am not emotionally like ready for this. Like, I usually, once I'm done with therapy, I honestly have this like mood change that makes me feel better right after therapy, and so I wasn't like in kind of like the headspace to start talking about it again. And then tonight came after a pretty long day, and I was like, you know, I don't have a video to put out tomorrow, and so I am gonna just talk about it, and it'll be a quick video. But here I am. I've been talking for 40 minutes now. I know the video's probably at like, you know, 9 or 10 minutes or something, but it probably longer than that because I talk so much. I'm gonna guess that I'm at like 16, yeah, I'll say 16 minutes. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm way off, and this part will be embarrassing. Why am I doing this prediction game here? Hoods up. The video's almost over, I swear. There's so many other things I always want to talk about. This feels like therapy, where I'm like, I didn't want to talk about it, and then once I start talking about it, I don't want to stop talking about it. But, you know, there's so many things that are going on right now with trying to figure out whether it's even worth it to spend as much time as I do putting out videos that I don't think are really making an effect on anybody besides my own self-worth, I guess. It's hard for me to stop making daily videos because, you know, it's my job and I love the idea of putting stuff out and seeing how people react to it. But at the same time, I find myself constantly rushing to figure stuff out and put stuff out there. And as many times as people comment, hey, you got to take time for yourself and make sure you're okay. Yeah, I know that. But there's a lot of other stuff at play, and there's a lot of other stuff in my head that makes me want to keep going. And so that's something I'm worrying about. I'll also, you know, I don't know. Pity party for Nick, I guess. The last thing I want to say is that my life is very good. I am a very privileged person who has been very, very lucky and has been dealt two aces, baby. I have a wonderful family and a wonderful job and wonderful people who surround me. But even the most perfect, beautiful, wonderful, most talented, top of the notch people in the world like myself still have our little issues, don't we? That's a joke, guys. It's just a joke. I don't think that. But, you know, I don't know. This is one of those things where it's like, I don't know, my job or whatever doesn't really change how I feel about this. And if I have this job, you know, and I don't have a video to make tomorrow, I might as well monetize my biggest fear in life, you know, make a little bit of money off of that, about how scared I am. So I think that's it, right? I don't know. Maybe I'll make a part 2 to this because I feel like there's going to be more I want to say. And I've been talking for literally 45 minutes of my life right now. It's 12:25 in the morning and I need to put this out at 10 a.m. tomorrow, I hope. But that's it. That's all. Thanks for listening to me. And I hope this wasn't like a bad video to watch. I don't know. Honestly, like, if it was a bad video watch, those people aren't around by now, and you're probably still listening. And if you are, I thank you so much for still being here. If it resonated with you, it would mean a lot to me if you left a comment and gave me your thoughts on it, because I want to hear from people and I want to know what other people are thinking and not feel like I'm stuck in my own head and not talking about this thing that matters a lot to me. Anyways, who knows if this video will come out, but I'm guessing it will be. I don't like wasting my time on stuff and not like putting it out, so most likely likely I'll put it out. But yeah, I appreciate you all. Thank you for supporting me in everything I do. And, you know, I assume the comments are going to be overly nice on this one, like you guys always are when I post stuff that I care about. And that just is so awesome to me. So thank you in advance for how kind the comments are. Unless I like said something on accident that's super offensive and like everyone in the comments is just like hating me. If that's the case, then I'm sorry for what I said. You know, I apologize. There's a true lapse in my judgment and I screwed up. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. And I hope you have a great night. And I hope I didn't freak you out a little bit. Everything's going to be okay. Everything will be all right. And we just have to keep pushing through it. And yeah, we'll talk. We will talk. Love you all. Thank you for giving me the best job in the world and the best audience in the world and allowing me to work from this little dinky chair right here. I cannot thank you enough. Bye.